Set Phasers, a highly illogical Star Trek podcast.
Hello and welcome. Welcome once again.
We've made it.
We
once
have made
more
it.
unto the breach.
Unto the breach. Welcome once again to Set Phasers, a highly illogical Star Trek podcast about Star Trek Discovery with your hosts. I am Steph.
And I am Akie. And this is a Stardate 1082.1.6. And we will be discussing episode 9 of season 1, Into the Forest I Go, and episode 10 of season 1, Despite Yourself. Things are going to get heavy. Whoa.
And a spoiler, it might be a mirror universe.
It might.
It might.
You never know.
Shall we do it? Shall we do the rundown, Akie?
I think we should.
It's time to run it down.
Can you run it down for me?
What just happened?
Can you run it down for
You know, they're bringing Sister back to Netflix. Did you see that? I got super
Yes.
excited.
Super excited about Tia and Tamara returning once again to prime time or streaming or whatever. That's interesting. Are they doing like a 20 years later?
I don't know.
Tia and Tamara, sister.
You don't know how much I miss you.
And that was Jean. That was we don't have to go into that's a third podcast we'll do
yeah.
with 90s sitcoms.
Yes. Nickelodeon. Oh, brilliance.
Great. Wow, we have basically an entire career set out ahead of us. But
We do.
well, we're supposed to run it down. We played the run it down music and we're not running.
I'm sorry. I went off on a tangent as I often
It's
want
okay.
to do.
Meanwhile, that song did sort of sound like the Sister.
Did a little bit. It
All right.
reminded me.
So episode 9 of Star Trek Discovery. We begin with the captain, Lorca, receiving a message from the Starfleet command. And they're saying, listen, you screwed up at Pavo. You were supposed to turn that big crystalline antenna into a thing that helps us see Klingon vessels. And instead, it's inviting the Klingons and us to come and do peace talks, which is not going to work because we all know Klingons are not going to get down like that. So they're saying, listen, we're asking everyone to retreat. We want you to come back to Starbase 46. We want to see you here. And then we'll figure out where we go from there. Lorca's like, okay. And then he signs off. And then he's like, yeah, we're not doing that. Here's what I want you to do. We're not jumping to Starbase 46. I want you to go warp 5. That's like, come on, dude.
So cunning.
Yeah, he's like warp 5 towards Starbase 46. And then as we have 3 hours before the Klingons get to Pavo. So we got to figure out how to break through their cloak in 3 hours. And then we're going to jump back to Pavo and we're going to save the planet. That's what he's saying at any rate. I think
It's Star Trek.
Mhm.
You know, Captain Rebellion.
Yes.
It's got that sort
Right.
of thing about it, right? It's got that Captain Kirk thing.
Because I did notice that, like, episode 1, the Vulcan hello, we get all this business about Michael, don't disobey orders, chain of command, do everything right, you know? And everyone sort of like blames her for starting the war. And then this guy's like, hey, here's what we're going to do. Defy orders, jump back and prosecute this war on our own. And the whole crew's like, yeah. And that's the power of captaincy. I feel like captains are just given so much leeway. Anyway, okay. So Lorca says to Stamets, we need to have like a plausible deniability for why we're not using the spore drive. And so he says, you're having some trouble with your implant, you know, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And Stamets says, yeah, I think I am actually. And he says, oh, great. Now go down to the doctor and have him run a bunch of tests. And if you'll recall, in the last episode, Stamets admitted to Tilly that his brain's been feeling a little weird because he's been floating around on the mycelial network, jumping through time and stuff. He's not well, and he does not want to be tested by the doctor, but now he has to be. And the doctor, by the way, is his partner, Dr. Hugh Culber. So anyway, credits. Boom. When we get back, Starfleet has done its thing. We get the captain comes on the bridge. Is like, we now got 2 hours and some odd minutes before the Klingons show up. Tell me you figure something out. And then all the sciencey people do all their sciencey stuff. And they're like, here's what we need to do. We think they're moving gravitational waves around their ship, and we got to put 2 sensors on their ship, and then once we have the sensors, we can use that to get information about where the ship is and how it's distorting space. The only problem is it's going to take days to get all the data that we need. It's Lorca looks off and says, we don't have days, but we do have a spore drive. So then he goes down to sick bay, and Stamets is like, ooh, and Culber's like, ooh, because they obviously just discovered that white matter in his brain is turning into 4-dimensional juice.
Some questionable Star Trek science.
Yeah, come on, this is total. He's like, your mitocidal
Lobotomy,
is happening.
thing, yeah.
Yeah, phlebotomy. So he's kind of like, I don't think you should be doing any more jumps. And of course, this is when Lorca comes in and he's like, here's what I need you to do. I need you to make more jumps than you've ever made in your life. I need you to make 133 micro jumps.
I was going to ask how many it was. Okay.
Yeah, it was 133. Yeah.
I know you have notes.
Hey, I have extensive notes in front of me. Yes. 133 micro jumps. And apparently,
I'm sorry. Would you say it again in your...
Excuse me. We need you to do 133 micro jumps. Is that
perfect?
Yeah. And Stamets is like, but my brain. And then Lorca's like, hey, do you want to be a god of science? And Stamets is like, yeah. Basically. And then, Stamets is like Lorca says like, look at all this jump data, and Stamets is blown away that Lorca's been keeping jump data. He's like kind of like flattered that the captain's interested in his science project, and the captain's like, look at this, can you see there might be an alternate universe and ways to go there through the mycelial network, and we have all this data, and your work is so important for the future of the Federation. We're going to find new ways to travel and fly and explore, but once this war is over. And Stamets is like, to end this war, I'll do it. All right, so back on the bridge, the captain is like, okay, Tyler, because that's his his number one cat. He's like, Tyler, I want you to set up a 2-person team to go on that. When we get there to the Klingon vessel, you guys are going to jump in and place the 2 thingies. Place the 2. They call them 2 different things.
Beacons.
Once they were calling them like beacons,
Sensors?
they called them sensors. I'm going to go with sensors.
And the idea was that these 2 things are on the ship, and then you can triangulate, big fancy word, where the ship is, because you've got these 2 points of origin.
But it would normally have taken days, so thankfully they can force Paul Stamets to do 133 jumps to give them a bunch of different vectors from which to judge the information, and cuts the days down into 4 minutes, apparently. So that's the big plan that they have. They got to show up, they got to get the Klingon ship to decloak, and then once it decloaks and before its shields are up, it's vulnerable to them transporting in, and then they got to place the 2 sensors, and then they have to do the 133 jumps once the ship is recloaked, which will take 4 minutes, and then once they come back, they got to analyze the data, and then they'll be able to see exactly where the ship is, because you can't have a cloak and a shield up, apparently. I think that's true through TNG, but I'm not entirely sure, and I forgot to look it up, but I do seem to recall that there was a vulnerable moment.
When you fire, you have to lower shields? Is that what? No, you have to lower the cloak.
I think you have to lower. Yes, you have to lower the cloak.
Right.
Yeah, you can't fire from cloak. Every D&D wizard worth his salt knows that. Okay, so Tyler wants Burnham to be the second person, and Lorca is adamantly against it. But Michael's like, listen, I'm the only one who's been on that ship. I was there with Georgia when she died. But I know what the ship looks like, and I know how to move around it, and I'm the person to do it. And Lorca's still like, absolutely not. You tell somebody else. And Michael says, well, it's not logical. It's a real Vulcan moment.
I, Vulcan.
And then she says, not unless this is about me. And then Lorca's kind of like, ooh, we get a lot of like Lorca giving us he's got some weird things going on in this episode. For an episode where a lot of other people are having weird things happen to their mind and we get distracted, Lorca's also going through some machinations.
That's a great word. I love machinations.
Machinations. It could be just pronounced machination. I don't know.
It could, but it just reminds me of Sean Connery. Machinations.
Moneypenny. Machinations. Yes. So it's hard to stop talking like that. Michael basically convinces him with a cool quote, which I will save for our quotation section, which reminds me I shouldn't throw this paper too far away. But essentially, she convinces him and he says, all right, you go, but you come back safe. Anyway, so we're about to do the jumpy business and Dr. Culber shows up and Tilly kind of spills the beans that Stamets has known for a while. That everything's not right and that he's been having weird side effects. And Culber's like, you know what? Forget it. I should have known. It's fine. Here's a weird medical arm brace that will allow me to monitor you while you're doing the jumps and give you medicine from outside of the jump room, which I should really figure out the name is.
The sauna thing, the spore sauna.
Yes. Lorca makes a kind of speech, which I thought about writing down, but it's not really that inspiring. He's like, basically says, when I met you all, you were a bunch of stupid eggheads who were weak, and now you're strong.
We finally get that encouraging speech from Lorca to his crew.
Sort of, but it's still kind of like, you stopped being nerds and finally you got some guts. You chumps, so now let's go kill some Klingon.
It does feel sort of like that army boot camp type speech where we're going to break you and then build you back up.
Yeah.
But I'm still going to show you that I did it.
Yeah, it was me. But he does extend an arm to like community of the ship. He's like, no ship but Discovery can do this, So that's nice, I guess. They jump to Pavo and then we jump to the Klingon ship and Cole is there and he is talking a lot of smack about what he's going to do to the Federation, blah, 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 blah. Someone tells him that Discovery is there. He goes, oh, they're there and they're sitting ducks. And he says, prepare to drop cloak and fire. We will storm her decks, execute her crew and take her storied weapon for our own. It's a little over the top, Cole, but that's all right because we know it's interesting. There's it's a fine line between being an awesome Klingon and being a jerk Klingon. Like to have honor and be a warrior and have like this caliber of person, and then that can turn so quickly into someone like Cole, who's just like a blood mongering maniac, who just monologues about how much power he'll have and how much respect he'll gain.
Yeah.
Anyway, we don't have to go into that right now. We sure will later. Back on the ship. Tyler and Michael transport over and they have like these pattern things that allow them to appear to be Klingon life signs. So they get onto the ship once the ship drops cloak and starts attacking the Discovery, and Discovery's kind of flying around doing their evasion formation betazoid or whatever. And they get one sensor in place. And as they're going to move the second one, they discover behind a door a human life sign. Tyler says, oh yeah, a human life sign.
Wait.
The trail of that is long and I am not mad about it. Okay, so Tyler's like, we got to finish the mission. And Michael says, everyone comes home. We're not leaving anyone behind. So they break open the door and who should they find in the Klingon abattoir but Admiral Cornwell.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Cornwell herself.
You always question yourself and you get it right most of the time.
I just feel like I got it wrong that one time and now I'm always like, is it Cornwall? Is it Cornwell? I know her first name's Katarina. So they find Cornwall, they wake her up, but she can't feel her legs. But also they find who we saw was dumped in there in the last episode, Laurel. And so Tyler sees Laurel and raises his phaser. And then he has a very interesting episode in which he has a PTSD attack, essentially. He freezes up, he starts sweating. He can't speak, he can't focus his eyes. He's just kind of keeping the gun trained. He's sort of, we're given these flashbacks of the torture that he suffered, and it's pretty gruesome looking. There's a lot of spinning blades and blood and bones and stuff, and pretty intense. Cornwell, whom you may recall is a psychologist, says she recognizes the signs of PTSD. Michael, no nonsense. She just shoots Laurel. Laurel is stunned. She gets knocked down. She puts Tyler next to Cornwell. Cornwell's like, why are you supposed to be here? Michael explains the mission. She says, I got to go. You're going to have to stay with Ash. She says, you're going to leave me. She says, I got to finish this mission. Don't worry. We're going to transport you out, but we got to win the war. Yeah, exactly.
I've got no choice.
Yeah, she's got to save him. Come on. So she leaves Cornwell with a gun, but Cornwell still can't feel her legs, apparently. So Michael goes on alone.
She was bashed against that thing with the electrocuted her.
Yeah, with the electricity. So it's like her spine is broken and she got electrocuted. I'm not sure. Anyway, she's not in good shape, but she's got her wits about her. Michael goes and she's able to plant the second. Now, see, I wrote transmitter here.
Oh, that would make sense.
Transmitter. They call them both. So Michael sets the second transmitter. They find out on Disco that the transmitters are set. They start taking data. And so back on Disco. Yeah, totally. They are like, okay, it's time to make these do the thing. So they do their weird jump and start like attacking. They like jump, attack, jump, attack. These are not even the 133 jumps.
Pew, pew,
I
pew.
realized in this watching. These are just jumps like it's so the Klingons are like, oh, they're shooting at us. So they recloak. And that's when they can start getting the information. Someone dying outside of my window?
Yep. That sounded like a Klingon
Just
death.
a Klingon. All right. So once the Klingon ship cloaks, that's when they're able to get the information. They do their 133 jumps. It is intense. And back on the Klingon ship, Cornwell is able to get Tyler sort of like back into his own frame of mind just in time to save them both from being attacked because sabotage has been discovered on the ship and people are trying to get into the room. So Tyler's able to come back. He pushes her aside from a phaser blast. He picks up a Klingon weapon, evaporates a Klingon, and then shuts the door. Yeah, pew, 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 pew. That was great. Thank you. Meanwhile, Michael is on the bridge of the what do they call it?
What do they call that? I was thinking about that. The death.
Do. It's not called the death ship. Oh, no, it just went away.
Discovery. We're gonna do that thing where we Google it.
You can Google that.
Oh, I don't find it. Do you?
I got it. It's the Klingon ship of the dead.
Yes, I was close.
The ship of the dead. Yeah, the dead ship, the death ship, the funeral ship, ship of the dead. Because they put the dead soldiers in the coffins on the
on the ship.
That's on the hull, which is bananas. Anyway, okay, back to the story.
Sorry.
Michael's on the bridge and she's hearing the Klingons talk and she's got her universal translator out, so she's able to hear what they're saying now. It's being translated into English. And the Klingons are like, hey, something's up. I think we should just probably go to warp.
I loved that moment. The
What did you love
universal
about it?
translator.
Yes, because
Because it was the first time I suppose we'd seen it a little bit in Enterprise, but just the sort of flippy thing, and you sort of heard the English and the Klingon being like at the same time, and then it faded out, and you were like, oh, okay, now
they
that's
did
how
it.
they're...
Yeah. I think they did it once or twice on TNG, but usually when it didn't work, usually they're like, oh, it's nothing in the universal translator. I can't get anything. That's usually when they brought it out.
I've never sort of seen it transition from one to the other, and then they're speaking the same language like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was cool.
Except in Enterprise, which I don't count because...
No, don't get me started on Enterprise. You got to have faith of the heart. You know where your heart's going to lead you. Okay. And so Michael decides, listen, I got to keep them here because she looks and she sees they've only done 76 jumps. They're only like halfway there. So she comes out of hiding. She reveals herself and she reveals that she is the killer of the Klingon Messiah T'Kuvma. And she she engages them in conversation. She's stalling. Meanwhile, just as like a bit that I kind of enjoyed that was creepy is that in the engineering, in the science room, Hugh, who's freaking out about what's going on with Stamets, runs up to the glass and says, how are you doing, Lieutenant? And Stamets looks at him and then says, there's a clearing in the forest. That's how they go, which is so terrifying. It's like, you're not doing well, I guess. So Michael manages to insult Cole enough that she's like, I want to fight you for the honor. And also Cole has the comm badge of Georgia. Yeah. And so she goes, I'll take that comm badge back because he kind of knows that she finds it precious because she's looking at it. And he puts it on his little metal Klingon thing. He's like, I will accept your challenge, human. And then they fight not with batleths, which would have really excited me. I probably wouldn't have known what to do with myself. And they fight with daggers, not batleths, but cool Klingon daggers. And Michael is basically getting the snot kicked out of her, but she is stalling enough.
She does well.
She does well, yes. Against a Klingon, yeah.
I'd say to last 5 minutes against a Klingon, you're doing well.
Oh, she does a great job. And in fact, she looks like so they get the information. the Klingons are still not firing on Disco. So Lorca decides not to jump away while they analyze the data. So they analyze the data. All this time, Michael is like fighting this dude Cole, like, and just getting slashed up, and he's and monologuing. He's like, "When I bring you back, your death will cement my power." Just that's what I mean. He's like, he's gone over the edge where he becomes like a super villain. He's maniacal. He can't stop monologuing how great he is. He's a loser. One thing I really did love, which only I think started this episode, is that Lorca calls Saru number 1 in this episode.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Yeah. When Saru is working on the data that's come in, he's like, "Get me that data, number 1." Okay, so that's page 1.
Woo!
Michael finally gets a good lick in on Cole, and she just like stabs him in the thigh, and then they figured out the cloak thing, so they transport away Tyler and Admiral Cornwell, and also Laurel regains consciousness and just like kind of like stows away. She goes for a ride on the transporter. Lucky her. And Michael, who hears that it's transport time, it seems like maybe, in fact, she was stalling instead of killing, right?
Yeah.
So, because then he like goes for an attack and she slips out and she grabs Georgia's thing and then like kicks off the banister and then hits him and then drops down and then transports as she's falling back onto the ship. Boom! And then Disco breaks the cloak and destroys the Klingon ship of the dead. Pew, 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 double pew, pew, pew. It's a big moment. Michael steps onto the bridge.
Yep.
She looks into Saru's eyes. Saru like smiles and nods, and she like closes her eyes and nods back. This is like resolution for them. They've destroyed the ship which started the war where they lost their beloved captain. So you would think that would be the end of the episode, but no. Cornwell manages to get on a emergency medical transport. She's sent to Starbase 88. Disco has the cloaking information, so they're commanded to head to Starbase 46 or to get all that information out to rest of Starfleet Command. Lorca is told by Starfleet Command that he needs to head to Starbase 46 now so that he can be given the Legion of Honor award. And when Lorca hears this, he seems very suspicious. I wondered, he just seemed like, Tyler goes to talk to Michael and he talks about the torture and he says it was 270 days. And he says there's like he calls them sick affections that they shared. So we get the sense that as earlier, it was not only torture, but also some level of like maybe some sexual goings on.
It's dark for Star Trek. I mean, we've touched on that before, but the visuals of it was quite dark. I think for me, it harkened back to TNG with Deanna Troi and that guy with the mind thing.
Yes, totes my goats.
That was a really dark episode for TNG, certainly at that time.
Yeah. This is like, it's kind of, but they're still dancing around it with the language. Like we sort of get the idea, but he's not saying anything. And he sort of says like he encouraged it because it helped keep him alive. So we get to understand there's a level of desperation to having been a prisoner. But then he says some really cornball stuff that I did write down where he's like, being with Michael almost made it all worth it. And then he's like, I found peace. And then they kiss. Oh, yeah. Bow, bow, chicka, chicka, chicka. We zoom in on Stamets's haunted eyes as he's looking out one of the viewports. Lorca comes up and he says, hey, they were trying to give me a medal. I told them to give it to you because you're great. And then I really feel like, so listen, spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
I felt like this was like a little bit of a reverse psychology. He's like, hey, yeah, we're, thanks so much. You're such a hero. We could jump to base 46, but, you look real tired. And I think we'll just take warp and we'll get there when we get there. And Stamps is like, well, listen, I could jump if you want to just get home, one more time. And he's like, oh, no. We can warp there. You don't have to jump. And Stamps is like, no, I'll jump one more time. And then he's like, it's one last jump. I'll never do it again because I think something terrible is happening to me. And after that, I'm just going to go see doctors. I need the best doctors in the world to fix me because something is very wrong with me. And so he agrees to do the one last jump. Tyler has some bad dreams. And that's where we get the real overlay of like torture and sex. That's when like the flashbacks are like they're in bed and then they're on the operating table and then they're moaning and then they're screaming.
And you get the sort of shot of Laurel,
En flagrante. They're both in a state of Déjà vu. So
Only you could make it sound like that.
well, I try to make it sound as unsexual as possible. It's a talent of mine. Hello, ladies. So when he wakes up from this weird dream, he goes staggering to see Laurel in the brig, and he falls down on her knees in front of her, and he asks her, "What did you do to me?" And she says, "Do not worry, I will never let them harm you." And then soon. So they're going to do this one last jump. And Stamets kisses Hugh, and I wrote down worries and promises because they both look super worried. But Stamets says, "Hey, we should next to Starbase 46, the place where we can check out Cassili and Opera, which we found out 2 episodes ago during the time thing is how they got together in the first place. And that Stamets hates it, but Hugh loves it. And they're playing La Boheme. And he's like, "You're going to go with me?" And he's like, "Of course, I'm going to have a lot of free time once this last jump is over," and blah, blah, blah. He gets into the chamber. We shoot to Lorca, who's apparently he's on his little captain's armchair thing, and he's fussing around with the jump coordinates. But we don't know exactly what he does. Whatever. And then he says, "Let's go home." And I call that like a half black alert. He never says black alert, but basically they're doing a jump. They jump. Stamets screams in the chair. The glass around him goes icy and opaque and weird. The computer reads it as an incomplete navigation sequence. When they finally pull Stamets out of the chamber, his eyes have gone like cloudy over, like milky white. And he's mumbling about seeing the infinite permutations, and it's beautiful. And on the bridge, Saru says that he doesn't know where they are. And that is the end of episode 9.
Yep.
All right. So when we end episode 9, we're kind of like, what's going on? What's happening? So when we come into it, this is great that we're binging them because I remember seeing this one live and being like, I can't wait till next week. I'll fucking, I'm going to schwitz all over the place. So a couple things just to say about episode 10. One, it's the beginning of chapter 2 of season 1. They did it in chapters. I think, and actually it was longer than a week between episode 9 and episode 10. I think it was like the holiday break, basically, end of December to early January. And 2, it is the first episode of Star Trek Discovery that is directed by your friend and my friend, Jonathan Frakes. Number 1 himself.
Numero uno,
Mr. Head Shake, Swivel, hop over the back of the chair.
The man who always walks out of a room askew.
Yeah, chin first. He's always leading with his chin. Anyway, he does a great job on this episode. He does. Whatever. He does a great job. So, yellow alert is how we begin the episode. So they're trying to recalibrate the sensors. They're trying to figure out what's gone wrong. They're surrounded by Klingon wreckage. Saru says it looks like they're in the right place according to the jump, but nothing else around them is right. The stars are not right. Nothing is correct. And Saru's threat ganglia go out as Tyler arrives on the bridge, which is interesting. But we'll come back to that later, perhaps. When they're still they're in like disarray, trying to figure out what's going on. A Vulcan cruiser approaches and they try to make contact. And before they can like even finish sort of being like, "Hey, Vulcan cruiser, what's going on? What happened?" They get fired on by the Vulcan cruiser, and it's a red alert.
Red alert.
So they're getting fired on, and they don't know what's going on. And then they get contacted by the Cooper, a ship they know that saves them, and says, "We'll take care of these Vulcan rebels for you." And then they're all like, "Rebels? What? Hubba, 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 yabba dabba dabba." We flash to Stamets, who is still on the floor with his eyes all cloudy, and Dr. Culber's like, he is out of commission. He is not going to be jumping anytime soon. I don't think he's even making memories. He's just mumbling nonsense. Back on the bridge, Saru figures out that the quantum signatures around them are different, to which Michael says, all matter has the same signature. All the matter in our universe would have the same quantum signature, to which Lorca, once again, looking far away, says, correct, unless this is not our universe. Credits. Okay, so we come back to the show. Disco is still in the debris field. And Lorca, Saru, and Michael are discussing, like, they're looking at the weird jump map that Lorca has in his weird office. And they're like, oh, okay, what happened? Blah, blah, blah. I wrote down that Lorca once again calls Saru number 1. Disco still has the cloak data, which they have not given to Starfleet Command. So they need to find a way. They know that they're not in their universe. They need to find a way back to their universe. And Lorca, they're like, we should check the navigation logs. And Lorca's like, no, we're not going to do that. We need to figure out where we are before we do anything, which does seem a little suspicious. And I wrote, Lorca hiding something, question mark. Back in sick bay, Stamets is saying all kinds of weird stuff. It seems very Alice in Wonderland related or something else. He's saying it's a palace.
Or something.
Stay close. Yeah. Tilly's trying to bring him around by asking him questions like she doesn't remember stuff because she knows how much he gets annoyed with her not knowing things or whatever. She's like, what's the optimal humidity for the spores? And
85 or 87 degrees.
And it's sad. And yeah. She's like, I thought I'd bring him around by being annoying. And Culber's like, he's in like a total state of mental disarray. There's nothing we can do. And then Stamets gets up and he's like, to the palace. And Culber tries to stop him and he like superhuman, like whoosh, like knocks you, Culber, across the room, which was interesting. That was creepy. And then he's like, chill. And they get him back on the bed and they put a force field around him for his own protection. At that moment, Lorca arrives. Huzzah! And Tilly takes off. And then Lorca and Culber kind of have it out. And I've always loved this dynamic in Star Trek. Is that like the captain is the captain. As we saw even in the last episode, the captain was like, hey, we're going to disobey a direct order. And the crew's like, cool. But when the chief medical officer's like, no, then usually the captain cannot do anything. They can be superseded by their chief medical officer. But in this instance, Lorca does not accept that. So, well, he sort of is like Stamets. Culber's like, Stamets can't go back into the thing. His mind is completely gone. And Lorca's like, I'm taking you off of his case because you're too close to this. You're too emotional. And Culber gets in his face and he's like, did you even want him to get better? You were supposed to take care of him. You forced him to do all this stuff. I think you knew. And Lorca's like, oh, he's so understanding here. Instead of like bristling the way I thought he would, he goes like, yeah, maybe I got too emotional. I really wanted to end the war. It was my mistake. Just like it would be a mistake for you to stay on his case. You have your orders. And he leaves. Meanwhile, Tyler is in a worker bee, which is like a little floating, not quite a thing. It has like arms and a laser. Because he's flying into the debris because they're like trying to, as Lorca's commanded, figure out where they are. So they're flying to the debris of the Klingon ship that surrounds them. And they're trying to pull out the data core so they can read the data core and figure out what's going on, where they are, what the history of the place is, just general information. While he's trying to do that, he has another episode of like flashbacks and disassociation and sweating and being not in control of his body and his mind. But he sort of manages to pull it together enough, even though he starts to raise some questions from Lorca as to why he's like having trouble navigating and controlling himself. He pulls it together enough to slice out the data core and bring it back to the ship. And while he's over there, he notices that among the wreckage, the bodies among the wreckage of this Klingon ship, Vulcan and Andorian in a Klingon ship.
Weird.
Yeah, super weird. So I'm guessing as soon as he gets back, Tyler goes to L'Rell again because that's the next thing that happens.
Of course. Why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah, he's like, I'm back. Because I guess he's like upset that things are happening in his head. And he thinks they've done something to him.
Yeah.
So he goes to her and he says, what did you do to me? And L'Rell says, you know what we did. We did it together. And then Tyler's like, he says, like, I'm remembering procedures, surgeries, all these like, so now it's like getting a little even more weird. It's not just torture and like weird sexual stuff. There's like maybe some sort of surgery or something happening. And L'Rell asks him to open her cell. And she says, I will give you all the truth if you open my cell. And he does. He opens the cell. What the what?
What is he thinking?
He wasn't thinking. He wasn't thinking, Steph. Poor Ash Tyler was not thinking. He opens it. She gets like, they look like they're about to kiss. She like gets in his face and they look like they're about to like make out. And then before that happens, he like grabs her by the neck and he's like choking her. And he's like, tell me what you did to me. And she's like, ah. And then she like snaps on him and she starts speaking in Klingon. And no, I didn't learn the Klingon. I thought about it, but we don't have time for that. In this. That could be for our Patreon subscribers. I will learn more Klingon and recite things for you. Ooh, that actually sounds like a lot of fun. Maybe just for me. She says,
I will not learn Klingon. I will leave that to you.
Well, you could be the translator. I could be like, and you could do the
I could
English
do that.
translations. Oh, this
That could
is
be
like
my job.
this is a fourth podcast. Okay, so she says in Klingon, "Whom do we seek?" And Tyler, who's like been freaking out, he like his eyes snap forward and he's still and he says, "Kalish." And she says, "How do we find him?" And he says, "Together." And she says, "Kalis gives us light to see." And he says, "Forever." And then they both say, "Will he hide from us forever?" And they both say, "Never." What? Can you hit me with a dun dun dun, please? Yes. What the what? Baba the rimming and flamming and his Manchurian candidating. And then he goes, the screen goes black, and Laurel asks him in Klingon, "What is your name?" And then he blacks out and he comes to, he's on the other side of the room with his gun out.
With a phaser?
Yeah, with his phaser out, excuse me, yeah. And he's like, "What did you do to me?" And she's like, "Oh," she's freaked out and he's freaked out. And she says, "The prayer should have made you remember something is wrong. You have a different name. What is it?" And he says, "You know our name." And then he kind of just like, he's like, "What am I doing?" He was about to like shoot her again or kiss her. It's weird.
He doesn't know. He's not sure.
He's not quite sure what's going on. And he throws her back in the thing, locks her up, and literally sprints out of the room. So Tyler's not doing great. Tyler then is in the mess hall drinking coffee, I guess. Looks like a coffee regular, milk and sugar. And Michael shows up and she's confronting him about his episode on the worker bee. And he tries to play it off. He's like, "Hey, I don't know. What are you talking about?" She's like, "Come on, dog." And he's like, "Listen, I went through some rough stuff and it was hard, but I don't want to tell the captain because for PTSD, you get quarantined. He would take me out the thing. And now that we're in some place that we don't even know when or where or why or how it is, I don't want to be taken off." And he's like, "You got to keep it a secret from the captain," which, I never like when people are like, "Keep a secret from the captain." It's the same thing Stamets said to Tilly. And look where that ended up. But here we are making the same stupid agreement. So she's like, "Fine, I trust you, Starfleet. I'll keep your secret. But if you have any issues, you come straight to me." And he's like, "I will, I promise." So she goes, and then he's looking at his cup. And then he has another blackout. And when he comes to, the cup is broken in his hands. The glass is all over the table, and he's bleeding. So, I don't know.
There's a lot going on for Ash Tyler.
This is the crux of this episode.
Yep.
This next scene. Because now they have unpacked the Klingon data core, and they discover that they are in a mirror universe where there is an alliance of Vulcans, Andorians, and Klingons, and they are fighting a xenophobic human empire, like a fascist empire called the Terran Empire. That has a faceless emperor, and they hate all other beings. And this was Steph's idea, so you should talk to them for a little bit while
Akie and I thought that to celebrate the Mirror Universe episode, we would switch it up. So I am now wearing a bow tie, and Akie has taken his off.
He's gonna wear a t-shirt like some jamoke. You know what? And we were talking about this.
I've never seen you in a t-shirt.
Who would want to? I think maybe I'm not allowed to put a bow tie back on until or unless the crew of the Discovery is able to make it back to their prime universe. So here I am in t-shirts now.
That might be a while.
Well, don't. Maybe next episode.
Sure.
Maybe they'll wrap it up this episode. They got the data core. Maybe they'll just figure it out. Okay, so anyway, they find out about the Terrans. They're ruled by a faceless emperor. They're just horrible. They're like everyone kills everyone. It's all like a power struggle. There's no honor. It's all like avarice and Machiavellian maneuvering, and they hate all other species and they want to kill all other species. And that is the mirror universe that they are in. As that happens, the Cooper comes calling again. And the Cooper's like, "Hey, what's going on? Why are you guys still hanging out in that debris field?" And they're like, "What, huh? What, huh?" And so they're like, "We got to figure out how to respond." And as they're trying to figure out how to respond, Lorca's about to jump on the horn and talk to them. And they're thinking maybe they'll just do voice only instead of video because they don't know what they're supposed to look like. But right before he's about to talk, Michael says, "Belay that. You're not actually the captain of Discovery. Sylvia Tilly is." They show a picture of Sylvia Tilly, and she has like a perm, straight hair with like blonde highlights. She's looking like very severe, very fascist. It's pretty sweet. And so they're like, "Tilly, you got to get on there and pretend to be, a badass captain of like in like an awful empire." And so Tilly gets on there and she has to play the part. And she does, I would say, a middling to awful job, but it's enough. And they're like, why are you having trouble with? She's at the mechanical problems. And she says, hold your horses. It's very Tilly.
What the heck? What the what?
Yeah,
what the hell?
What the hell? Hold your horses. And then she puts Lorca on the spot as their engineer. And how do you appraise as a true, speaker?
It's not bad.
You think his Scottish accent was okay?
It was definitely passable. I think when he's done it for longer, I think Jason Isaacs, he played a Scotsman for a detective series, I think on the BBC a couple of years ago. So he's well practiced at that accent. I think when it's longer, it's slightly more questionable, but for that particular thing, I thought he did really well.
It was cute. And obviously it's like a weird Scotty choice. It's meant to make us think of Scotty, who is yet to be around, I think, at this point. Anyway, or maybe he is around. He's just not on the weekend. Who knows? I'll Google it later. So anyway, he does in his Scottish accent, which is worth the price of admission, explains that they're getting stuff back together.
Right, Captain. We're trying to get our mechanical things all together now. Thanks very much. We'll chat to you later.
Yeah, you did a great job. That. Yours was a little too real.
Thank you.
More cartoonish next time. Could you give me? Okay. So it works. The Cooper goes away, and Lorca's like, all right, if we're going to survive here, we're going to need to look like we're part of the Terran Empire. So they go and they do it's like a montage thing where they like put on their emblems get different. They put away their Starfleet things, and like the Terran Empire has this like a world with like a sword through it or something, and it's red, and it's a ship around, and it's gold. It's a very bad, like totally big, awful militaristic regime stuff. Yes, they do that salute, which is and so we're trying to figure out part of that. Maybe the best part of that montage is figuring out who Tilly is, and Michael is explaining that Tilly in this world is known as the Slayer of Sorna Prime, the Witch of Werner Minor. She killed her former captain to take their spot, and she is called Captain Killy.
I love that.
Man, that's good. That's worth 10 episodes.
Yeah.
So they changed their insignia. They changed the ship to look more like it, and they changed their name to the ISS Disco. And I meant to look up USS versus ISS, but I think we all get the picture.
They called themselves the ISS Discovery, but they didn't. There wasn't any reference to them. Did they change it on the ship too?
I think they did on the ship. But they must have.
A very short space of time to go and repaint it.
They send out a drone and do the drone does the drone. Come on, they all changed their clothes and stuff. This is Starfleet. Come on. They know what they're doing. They know how to fit in.
You know us Treks. We get caught up in the details.
So Michael and Lorca find out about their counterparts. They find out that they were pretty high up in the regime of the Terran Empire. Michael was the captain of the Shenzhou, and Lorca was the captain of the Baran, like he is in the Prime universe. And apparently Lorca tried to stage a coup and kill the Emperor. And Michael, who was like the right-hand man of the Emperor, went after him, and Lorca destroyed her shuttle, apparently killing her. And then the Emperor, in retaliation, destroyed the entire ship and crew of the Baran, but it was believed that Lorca had escaped. And so Lorca comes up with this crazy plan because what they need is more info. Why do they need more info? I'll tell you, because they also find out in the data core that the USS Defiant, a ship from Federation times that they know of, was also here in this universe before. It does not have a spore drive. Apparently, in the future of follow me now. In the future of the main timeline, they fall into an anomaly and go into the past of the mirror universe. So in the mirror universe, it's past, but in the main universe, it hasn't happened yet. So they're trying to find out information on the Defiant on how to get back to their place. And the only way to do that is to get on an actual Terran ship. And so they stage this ridiculous idea, which is that Michael is still alive, and she hunted down the Lorca who tried to stage a coup and tried to kill her. And that's what she's been doing all this time. And now she's bringing him back to justice. And so that's the whole plan, that they contacted Tilly. And now Tilly is going to call the Shenzhou and have the Shenzhou come and pick them up so that Michael can take over and access the data core on the Shenzhou to find out about the USS Defiant, how he got in and out. That is how they intend to get home. It's a brain twister.
It's a little complicated.
Yes. I mean, listen, all you have to do is remember that one thing happened in the future. in the main place that hasn't happened yet, but it already happened because they go backwards in the other universe. So they had the information that the future ship will have, but they wouldn't have had it before. So now they can get it to go back to their time in the right time because of what will happen to the USF's Defiant. Yeah, don't think about it too hard. In any case, they change their clothes and Michael and Lorca pretend, I said don't think about it too hard. Lorca and Michael pretend to be themselves so they can get the info on the Defiant. So Tyler, who's starting to freak out, goes down to Dr. Culber and he's like, hey, I think you should do some scans. I'm not feeling so great. And I love this part because he's like, doctor's like, what do you think they did to you? And he's like, I don't know. I think they did something to my head, man. And he's like, well, it could be like PTSD stuff. He's like, no, I don't know. It's not that. It's not that. I just want to make sure they haven't done anything weird to me. And Hugh says, are you experiencing mood swings? Check. Are you experiencing fugue states? Check. Are you experiencing lost time? Check. And Tyler basically is like, no, not really. I just want to make sure that everything's, that I'm cool. So I don't know. I feel like, Tyler's conflicted. I understand. He's Starfleet. He doesn't want to keep lying. So the doc runs some scans, and while he's doing that, Stamets starts to freak out, and he says, stay out of the palace. Be careful. The enemy is here. And so Culber goes over to him, and he's like dealing with Stamets as the scans are running. And so Tilly, in the meantime, is getting advice from Michael on how to be Killy. And they sort of discuss, you got to just, your crew's going to get us through this, and you just have to really be an asshole. And so they hail the Shenzhou, and what's-his-face, Connor, who was on the original Shenzhou, is the captain there, and he's like giving them a bunch of lip to Tilly. And then Tilly's like, hey, I got a present for you that you'll like. And then Lorca like bangs his face into a wall because he's a maniac so that he looks like he's beaten up. And then they show up and Connor's like, oh, Captain Burnham. So good to, we thought you were dead. He's like, you thought exactly what I wanted you to think. And then Tilly is like, oh, wow, Connor, you're not showing a lot of respect to your captain. She does, you know what? This is a Tilly time. Tilly really comes through here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tilly, don't be silly. Tilly, space is wide.
Space is wide.
Clearly, it gets chilly.
It does get chilly.
Tilly, it's your time.
If there's one thing I know about space, it does get chilly. Clearly. So Tilly says some cool stuff that I assume we both have in our quotable moments for later, so I won't even bring it up, but she puts him in his place and forces the Shenzhou to come get them instead of whatever, and that works out, so they've got the Shenzhou on the hook. In the meantime, Hugh calls Tyler back down and he says, hey, I looked at your scans and you've got scar tissue around all your organs. And Tyler's like, yeah, from my torture. And he's like, yeah, that's what we initially thought. But I looked a little bit closer and it looks like what you went through was literally bone crushing. Like they opened your body up and bent and shaved and shortened things and like crushed your bones. And Tyler's like, okay. And he's like, yeah. So when we said that there was no like Manchurian thing, no engram on top of your brain, that was true. But it seems like maybe there's like they put it inside of you. There's something else inside of you. And Tyler's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, I don't know, mentally and physically, it seems like the Klingons did something to you. And Tyler's like, listen, they need me to help them right now. And he was like, that's the whole thing. You're not you. And so I'm going to ground you. And when he says he's going to ground Tyler hears a weird Klingon voice in his head. And he proceeds to snap the doctor's neck. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, no, it's rough. I wrote snaps his neck, all caps. And Stamets, who's not seeing things, but he's like in his own world, he just whispers, the enemy is here. The enemy is here. But that's close enough to the time that they're supposed to transfer over to the Shenzhou. So Michael and Lorca are ready to transfer over. Lorca pretending to be a prisoner and Michael pretending to be a captain. And Tyler shows up a little late and Lorca's like, where have you been? And he's like, there's no excuse for my lateness. I'm ready to go. And so they transport over to the Shenzhou. Connor shows up. He's like, Captain, great to see you. Let's put this guy in the brig. We go to the brig and there's like these little tubes that they call agonizer chambers, which apparently just people in, and it just causes them extreme pain. They're just screaming in these tubes and like lightning's flashing over their bodies. and they're going to put Lorca in one, and Michael tries to stop it, and then Lorca's like, you can't stop it because we got to play this to the bone. And she goes, okay. And so she goes up she's supposed to go to the bridge with Connor, and Connor, per Terran custom, tries to attack and kill her in the turbolift. And so they fight to the death. And, well, Michael wins. She shoves a giant dagger into Connor's stomach and he bleeds out. And she's like kind of screwed up because he was the guy that died on the original Shenzhou. And now she's had to kill him in cold blood. But the door's open. His body falls to the floor, bleeding out. And the crew turns around and they're clapping. All her friends from the original Shenzhou, they're there and they're clapping. And they say, the chair is yours. She sits down in the chair and they say, long live Captain Burnham. Long live the Empire. Yeah. And it's creepy. Later on, Michael, we assume some time has passed. She's entering her private chambers, her captain's chambers. And Tyler's in there. And he's like, and they freak each other out. And Tyler kind of like does like a half confession. He's like, it's going to be tough here. What this place makes us do, like, know that I'll always be there to protect you no matter what. And she's like, okay. And he's like, yeah. You know what I mean by that. And she's like, yeah, I think so. And then they get freaky.
So they're basically like, they're saying I love you, but not saying it.
Yeah. I thought the first time I watched this, I thought he was going to be like, no matter what happens here, I want you to know. He takes a pause. I thought he was going to say, I love you. I forgot to mention that Stamets and Hughes say that before the whole thing goes bad, which is very cute. Anyway, instead of saying that, he's like, I'll always be there for you. And she's like, yeah, I appreciate that. And then they get nasty on the bed. And while they're getting nasty on the bed, cut to the final scene of this episode is Lorca just screaming his head off in an agonizing tube. So, whoa. Woo. Before we do quotable moments, I feel it's important that we hit him with a little faith of the heart for Dr. Hugh Culber.
It's a good idea.
Dr. Hugh Culber, you were the best of us, honestly. I love the Ship's Doctor. Ship's Doctor, in almost every franchise of Star Trek, has a prominent role, from Bones to Crusher to Julian to Phlox to
the Doctor with no name.
Oh yeah, played by Robert Picardo.
Yep.
The emergency medical hologram. Anyway, you died unceremoniously. A traitor willingly or unwillingly killed you. And I just want you to know that to us, you had faith of the heart. Time for quotable moments?
Yes, indeed. Quotable moments.
Okay, what do you got? I'll let you do the honors because you deserve it.
Mine was despite yourself, and I think it was a Tilly moment.
Of course.
And when she was talking to Connor, and she said something like, "Connor, if you talk to me that way, I'd cut out your tongue to lick my boots."
That is very close to what it is verbatim. Fortunately, you have me here who has nothing better to do at this time.
Of course.
She says, if you greeted me that way, Connor, I'd cut out your tongue and use it to lick my boots. Yeah, very close.
Thank you.
Beautiful,
Yeah,
beautiful.
I should have written that down.
No, you don't have to write that down. That's what I'm here for.
It's your job.
It's my job. Okay. And then the quote that I thought was interesting, it's kind of subtle, but it's in Into the Farthest I Go. It's when Michael is making the case for why she should go to the Ship of the Dead. She says to Lorca, I'm here on borrowed time. When you asked me to stay, it was to help you win this war. Given the time I spent on that Klingon vessel, I'm the most qualified crewman to place the sensors. Otherwise, I have no purpose here. I think I just wanted to say, now that we're doing these 2-episode things, I like to try and come up with a little summation for both episodes. I think that these 2 episodes are, well, the first one, Into the Farthest I Go, is obviously about turning points, crossing the Rubicon, going past the point of no return. Everyone stretches themselves past a point of recovery. Tyler has his mental malfeasance when he sees L'Rell. Stamets in the very end he does 133 jumps and he does that one more that basically ends him. And Michael, almost dies trying to fight Cole to get back that emblem, the insignia of Georgiou. Anyway, I thought it was interesting. Yes, there it is. The insignia.
You know when you do your British accent, it reminds me of Captain Jack Sparrow.
Captain Jack Sparrow, because it's not quite
Sparrow.
British.
So you're a little bit drunk.
It's
You're
a bit drunk.
Yeah.
It's just drunk.
It's a bit drunk.
What were we doing? What was our Sean Connery from before? Syndrome?
Machinations.
Oh, machinations. Yeah. I don't really do a British accent. I just do a drunk, American doing a British accent. A drunk American who went to finishing school, essentially, is my British accent. Okay, next time?
Next time on Set Phasers.
Next time on Set Phasers, we'll be discussing The Wolf Inside, episode 11 of Star Trek Discovery, and Vaulting Ambition, episode 12 of Star Trek Discovery. So please tune in. I think you will enjoy it. Things are about to get very weird. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed the program, you can catch us every Friday at 8 p.m. on Facebook Live or as a podcast every Monday, wherever podcasts come from. So please subscribe.
We are on Facebook and Instagram, and my Instagram game is it's really ramping up.
Top notch.
Top notch. So we are at Set Phasers Podcast if you want to find us and like us there. Feel free to join us and join in the conversation of all things Trek.
Yes, sir. And if you would like to support us in our continuing mission to discover what Discovery has in store for us, we'd only be delighted. You can patronize us directly. We can take it by going to patreon.com/setphasers and signing up for one of our levels of patronage there.
Yep. Until next time, I'm Steph Mans.
And I'm Akie Burmese, not wearing a bow tie. And this has been Set Phasers, a highly illogical Star Trek podcast.
Computer. End program.